And after a 10-day, absolutely record-shattering journey around the moon, the 4 astronauts of Artemis 2 are screaming back towards Earth. But believe it or not, the most dangerous part of their entire mission is still ahead of them. Okay, let's dive right into this final fiery descent. The Artemis 2 crew has reached a distance of 252,756 miles from Earth. They pushed past the mark set by Apollo 13 in 1970, taking 4 humans further out into the cosmos than our species has ever gone. Out here, past the far side of the moon, there is no atmospheric drag. There is no sound. The capsule drifts through an environment of absolute freezing isolation. But to return home, the crew must execute a brutal physics equation. They have to trade the total stillness of deep space for a violent, high-speed collision with our atmosphere. Returning from low Earth orbit, like a trip back from the International Space Station, brings a vehicle in at roughly 17,500 miles per hour. A return from the moon requires managing radically more kinetic energy. For days, Earth's gravity well has been relentlessly pulling on this 21,000-pound capsule, accelerating it every single second of the descent. By the time it reaches the edge of the atmosphere, the spacecraft is moving at 25,000 miles per hour. That is Mach 35. There are no brakes in the vacuum of space. The only way to shed that speed and keep the capsule from slamming into the ocean is to crash directly into the atmosphere and force friction to absorb the kinetic energy. At 7:15 p.m., the crew module physically detaches from the European service module that kept them alive in deep space. They cross the point of no return, locking the crew into a mandatory high-speed impact with the air above the Pacific. The only thing standing between the astronauts and incineration is this 16.5-foot wide AIF-coat heat shield. It is composed of a titanium base covered in an ablative epoxy resin. But after the uncrewed Artemis 1 test flight in 2022, engineers recovering the capsule found a severe structural vulnerability. The shield did not erode the way their models predicted. Looking at this animated cross-section, we can see the failure mechanism. The standard skip entry trajectory allowed the heat shield to cool briefly between atmospheric dips. That cooling caused the surface to lose permeability. When the resin underneath heated up and pyrolyzed, the resulting gas had nowhere to go. It expanded under the char layer, causing chunks of the shield to unpredictably pop off. Redesigning Rut Shield would delay the Artemis program by at least a year and a half. Instead, NASA opted for a workaround. They programmed a new lofted profile, a shorter, significantly steeper dive into the atmosphere. This steeper angle forces the capsule to maintain immense constant thermal stress. Because the shield never gets a chance to cool, the material stays permeable. The pressure allows the pyrolyzed gas to vent cleanly through the surface, preventing the explosive buildup that shatters the ablative layer. Rather than rip out the hardware, the agency is using orbital mechanics to fix a material science problem, staking the integrity of the mission on this aggressive new entry path. At 7:37 p.m., the capsule angles its base forward. The crew braces for the physical wall of the atmosphere. 16 minutes later, at exactly 7:53 p.m., the capsule drops past 400,000 feet. Atmospheric interface begins. At Mach 35, the friction of hitting the thin upper atmosphere is so violent, it physically rips electrons away from the surrounding air molecules. The air transforms into an electrically charged envelope of plasma, entirely swallowing the spacecraft in a white-hot shroud. The temperature immediately outside the capsule windows spikes to 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The crew is now riding inside a localized furnace burning half as hot as the surface of the sun. Inside, the sudden deceleration hits the crew with up to 3.9 Gs. They are pinned hard against these seats, physically immobilized by their own momentum. Down on Earth, mission control can do nothing but watch as the telemetry screens freeze. The room goes entirely silent. That superheated plasma envelope wrapped around the capsule is too dense for radio waves to pass through. All communication is physically blocked by the ionized air. At the exact second the heat shield is enduring its absolute maximum thermal and structural load, the crew is subjected to a mandatory 6-minute communications blackout. If the newly calculated lofted trajectory brings them in too steep, the resulting G-forces will scale up rapidly and crush the crew. If the angle is even slightly too shallow, the capsule will skip off the upper atmosphere like a stone on a pond, bouncing them back into deep space with no fuel to return. And if the AVCOAT heat shield repeats the Artemis 1 anomaly and cracks under the pressure, the 5,000-degree plasma will breach the hull and incinerate the capsule instantly. 4 human beings are plummeting through the dark, thousands of miles an hour above the Pacific Ocean, completely cut off from our species. Will the modified trajectory work? Will the heat shield hold long enough for parachute deployment? Right now, Mission Control is staring at static, waiting to hear a voice on the radio.
Let's just run through this final timeline, minute by minute. At 7:53 p.m. Eastern, boom, Orion hits the atmosphere. Plasma immediately engulfs the capsule, and that kicks off a planned but incredibly nerve-wracking 6-minute communication blackout. For 6 minutes, Mission Control is blind, and the entire world is just holding its breath. Then at 8:03, the first set of parachutes, the drogues, they pop out to stabilize the capsule. Just 1 minute later at 8:04, the 3 massive main chutes unfurl, and each one is a staggering 116 feet wide.
And then at 8:07 p.m., right on the money, touchdown. Orion splashes down safely in the Pacific Ocean, right off the coast of San Diego. After a journey of over 690,000 miles, the Artemis 2 crew is finally back on Earth. You could just feel the relief and the triumph wash over everyone. Speaking right from the deck of the recovery ship, NASA Administrator Bill Nelson, he just called it a perfect mission. And that really cemented the historic success. And honestly, the flawless performance of both the crew and the spacecraft itself. But hey, the mission isn't truly over until that crew is safely out of the capsule, right? So let's take a look at the recovery operation, which was this meticulously planned joint effort between NASA and the US Navy. The recovery was truly a masterclass in coordination. First, you had the recovery boats approaching Orion. Then they attached this cool inflatable raft they called the front porch right to the hatch. This let the astronauts get out safely onto the raft before they were flown over to the USS John P. Murtha. And here it is. This is the sight everyone was waiting for. All 4 astronauts, safe and sound aboard the USS John P. Murtha. And get this, they even walked under their own power to the ship's medical bay for evaluation. What a fantastic end to a totally textbook operation. You know, this mission wasn't just a technical success. It was a huge human milestone. The crew itself represents this incredible leap forward in space exploration. I mean, just look at this crew. You have Commander Reid Wiseman leading the first human mission back to the moon in over half a century. Victor Glover became the first person of color to fly on a lunar mission, Christina Koch, the first woman, and Jeremy Hansen of the Canadian Space Agency, the first non-American. Together, they are really the ambassadors of a whole new era. And as a team, they didn't just go back to the moon. They went farther than any human beings have ever gone before. For 56 years, the crew of Apollo 13 held the record for the farthest humans have ever traveled from Earth. Well, Artemis 2 completely shattered that record. At its absolute peak distance, Orion was over 252,000 miles from home. That's more than 4,000 miles farther into the cosmos than humanity has ever ventured. But, you know, at the end of the day, Artemis 2 was never meant to be the final destination. It was, in its essence, a symbol. The whole point was about proving the hardware, proving the systems, and bringing this crew home safely, all so they could pass the baton to the next mission, to Artemis 3, and say, all right, it's your turn, go. So yeah, Artemis 2 was the critical dress rehearsal. It proved the systems work and that we can once again safely travel to deep space and come back. So what's next? Well, the next step is Artemis 3, landing astronauts on the lunar surface for the first time since 1972. That's the move that paves the way for a permanent presence on the moon and, eventually, that giant leap, the journey to Mars. This isn't the end of the story. It's really just the beginning.